Klentak basically came out today and answered the questions because the questions were coming at him, and they basically said he's not getting fired this year, so pump the brakes, Scott. And it sounds like they at least knew the hot questions were coming today. They seemed prepared for it.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, it was a situation where you're coming out of a sweep by the Marlins at home. You've lost 7 in a row. And, of course, I think it was their first kind of opportunity to get a crack at asking the GM some of the questions we've been asking the manager for the past 7 games. And so, sure, I mean, he faced a lot of those same questions today. And I guess the Cliff Notes version is that, the players have to play. I mean, they put together a team that they expect to be a lot better than this. And they're probably not going to make a trade at the deadline or a move involving the staff that's going to be any more impactful than just the guys they've got playing to the level that they know how to play. So that was the message he wanted to send today, was that his manager's not going anywhere, coaching staff's not going anywhere, players have to play.
Yeah, and I know that they got a team coming in that has their own problems with the manager and stuff, but it seemed like these two teams, it was almost like it felt like this series, if you were to get swept or lost, like something major or drastic may have happened. But I guess Klentak jumped out in front of it and said, nope. So if something major or drastic isn't going to happen, what changes can they make if they, in fact, lose 2 out of 3 or potentially even get swept in this series? What's the end game here?
I mean, look, I think that they are betting on the team they have, and they are betting that this will not continue, that they'll play a lot better than this. They've had a really, really bad 3.5 weeks. They've lost 10 games in the standings in 3 weeks. I mean, you think about that, like, we always think about the 2007 Phillies, right, gaining 7.5 games in 17 days to win that division. 10 games, losing 10 games in the standings in about 26 days. It's pretty remarkable. It's a stretch you don't often see. So, they are counting on the fact that they will hit a lot better than they've hit the last 3.5 weeks, that their bullpen will come back together again with Hunter pitching again tomorrow night, I believe, and then Robertson maybe getting off a mound for a bullpen session later this week. They're betting on the guys they've got to be better than they've been, and that's really kind of what their message was today, like I said.
Scott, when you're in the clubhouse, you're following the team, things happen. It's a long season. It could be June swoon, although it seems much worse than just it's June and they're going through a slump. But more importantly and potentially more concerning is the culture and the vibe in the clubhouse. Are players walking around, frustrated, although that could be a good thing, but it also could be a bad thing, heads down? Are they together? Are they not together? Like things that are not as tangible that can really make or break a team. What do you see in that aspect?
Well, I love that question because, we only see as much as they will allow us to see. I've been around teams that are playing well and teams that are playing poorly, and people always ask that, like, what's the mood of the team like? Well, you have to understand, I mean, we're in there for a designated amount of time before the game. We're in there right after a game. There are 10 or 11 or 12 rooms in there that we don't have access to that are off the clubhouse. So to a certain degree, you see what they'd like you to see. Now, I don't see a team that's been bopping around blasting music and high-fiving one another and acting as though they're on a 7-game winning streak. I don't see guys, walking around like, with their heads dragging on the floor either. It's kind of been sort of in the middle. After a loss, the clubhouse has felt the same. It's kind of felt, like it's not people are gathering their things to go home, and, there's not a whole lot of emotion one way or another. And so, I think that it's been a group that's been trying, I think, to stay the course and to keep an even keel. I mean, baseball is the kind of a game where if you get too high or you get too down, you're going to drive yourself insane. You're going to become kind of a manic depressive because you play so many games and you win so many and you lose so many. I've covered other sports where you play 3 times a week, and after you win, you're the greatest team in the world, and after you lose, you're horrible, and you can get away with that because you only play three times a week. not that way in this sport. So I think they're trying to keep an even keel. I think there's frustration that's been setting in because they haven't played well now for quite a while. I would love to see a little bit more fire sometimes, but again, I mean, maybe that's stuff we just don't see because we're not in there at that time. So there honestly does not seem like a whole lot that's out of the ordinary right now for a team that's just playing poorly. As I said, it's been kind of a very sort of, get your things and go kind of thing. Not a whole lot of celebrating because there's not been a whole lot to celebrate about.
Talk about the loss of McCutchen, because it seems like ever since McCutchen went down, this team has really unraveled. It could be a coincidence. I don't think it is. They can't get a lineup out there that they feel good about. They can't manufacture any runs in the first inning. That move was questioned all offseason long. You're getting an aging former MVP, overpaying him, this and that. And it seems like since he's gone down, this team has no identity and is not able to do anything offensively. Yeah,
I'm a little bit surprised as well that it's had as big of an effect as it's had, but it's had a major effect, let me tell you. I mean, and it's not only from the standpoint of not being able to replace him in the leadoff spot. They've tried Cesar Hernandez. They've tried Gene Segura. They're trying Scott Kingery today. They tried Bryce Harper for about 3 or 4 games there. They've tried a lot of different things and haven't really had a whole lot of success out of the leadoff spot, sort of setting the table for the rest of the lineup. It's funny that a lineup can sort of come undone by removing one piece, but when it's the piece at the top, it's a very important one. But it's also off the field. I mean, you talk about I talked about keeping an even keel, not getting too high or too low, kind of setting a tone. And McCutchen was a guy who I think just by virtue of being a veteran player, a guy who's been around now for 10 years almost and has seen highs and lows, I think is a guy that a lot of guys sort of follow. There's a lot of follow the leader when it comes to Andrew McCutchen. They haven't had that the past 3 weeks. I sort of wonder, we focused so much on should Segura have been benched after the 2 hustling incidents. Cesar Hernandez had an incident this week. Should he have been benched? We focused so much on that. Well, there's a certain thing, too, called policing the clubhouse among the players. And I sort of wonder whether if Andrew McCutchen was around, and he hasn't been, he's been recuperating after his surgery. Had he been around, would he be a guy who could get in someone's face or at least tap a guy on the shoulder and say, we can't tolerate that right now. And I think there's something to that. They missed that leadership and having him around. Now, the good news is he's planning on spending some time around the team once he's able. But right now he's been away from the team, and so off the field, to me, it's had as big an effect as it has on the field.
I brought that up earlier, Scott, to Mike, is I want a report of a players-only meeting. I want a report of Harper getting in someone's face or getting in who's the leader now that McCutchen's gone, and I think that's a very good point that you raised, because it's not just Kapler, it's not just Klentak. These players need to hold themselves and each other accountable, and it doesn't seem like that's taking place.
Yeah, Gabe Kapler made an interesting analogy this afternoon. He was talking about, disciplining players for things like that, or kind of at least talking to players. And sometimes he said, it's like a family. Sometimes you misbehave within the family, and it's the mother who has the strongest impact on you, or sometimes it's the father. Sometimes it's an uncle. Other times it's maybe a sibling, a brother or a sister who says, cut it out. Well, I think the same applies here. Sometimes it's the manager, but it's not always. Sometimes the strongest voice is the voice of the player at the locker next to you going, we're not scoring runs here. You got to run out that pop-up, because if you don't, and somebody screws up, it's going to cost us a run. And sometimes it's a voice from next to you, a peer. And I don't know that there's been a whole lot of that going on right now. Maybe there has, and we just haven't heard about it or seen it. But I just, McCutchen's the guy who I think led a lot by the example that he set, and I think just commanded a certain amount of respect. And look, we've talked about Phillies teams of the past. Darren Dalton, right, was a guy who always sort of led by both example and by getting in the guy's face. And you'd like to think that someone's going to step up and do that in situations like this, not just the manager.
We're talking with Scott Lauber. We'll leave you on this. I saw a tweet from one of your colleagues there, Matt Gelb, and the tweet says that Klentak, who spoke for, by the way, 20 minutes today. Number one, is this often? Was this planned, or did they just kind of throw him out there because they knew that it was getting a little tense? And two, he said, if this group of 25 guys plays well, we'll be a playoff team. If this group of 25 guys does not play well, we will not. It almost sounds like, look, this is the group, 25 guys. There's no trades to be made. We don't have anything we can do. It's up to these guys here.
Okay, so two parts to your question. No, it's not. It's not terribly unusual. He likes to do stuff like this. If not once a homestand, then then at various intervals during the season. I think he sensed, like anyone else would, that this was a time for it. The manager faces this every single day, and the general manager is a partner here too, as well, with the manager. And it was an appropriate time to face some of these questions. So, and very often it goes on for 15 or 20 minutes. So, not terribly unusual, but certainly timed accordingly with what's going on with the team. And the answer to that question was, I asked him a question about pursuing pitching at the trade deadline specifically, and I think Matt asked him a question about what do you feel like your biggest need is right now, and he's certainly 5 weeks away from the trade deadline, not saying we're not going to do something to improve. I think the point he was trying to make in that part of the quote, which was much longer, was I'm probably not going to be able to go out and trade for a piece that is going to turn it around by itself. And so, we're going to rely on the guys who are here to play to their level. And if they do that, he feels like they're going to make the playoffs. If they don't do that, they won't. And, I think about other teams, like how many years in a row now have we looked at the team like the Washington Nationals and said, boy, they're not playing, up to the level that you'd expect based on their roster. So it happens. It happens every year that there are teams that disappoint. And I think that was the point he was trying to make, was if the guys who are here and the team that they built play to the level that they are capable of playing to, that they have played to in the past, he believes they're a playoff team independent of anything they do at the deadline. They will, of course, look to upgrade. I asked him specifically about the pitching, and he said, unlike last year where he didn't want to get involved in the starting pitching market, he'd be more open to it this year. There are going to be other needs as well. I mean, we've seen they've gotten very little production out of third base. Maybe that's a spot they look to. They could probably use another outfielder, at least someone off the bench. That's something they may look to. But they're going to look to upgrade wherever they can. But if all the guys that have underachieved so far don't start to play to their level, not going to make a whole heck of a lot of difference.
At Scott Lauber on Twitter from the Philadelphia Inquirer. You can check him out there on Twitter as the Phillies and the Mets, a very tenuous couple of teams battling in the National League, which feels like a really important series for both of these teams with what's going on. Scott, we appreciate it as always, pal.
Okay, anytime, guys.
Scott Lauber, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline.